Welcome, everyone. Today we're diving into one of the most important stories in global technology, trade, and geopolitics: China's new rare earth regulations and their ripple effects across the world. Rare earth elements might sound like a niche topic, minerals you've never held in your hand, but in reality, they are the backbone of modern civilization. They power our smartphones, electric vehicles, renewable energy grids, AI chips, and even advanced military systems. In other words, these tiny elements are big levers of technological and strategic power. On October 9, 2025, China issued new export control rules on rare earth materials and technology. Almost immediately, experts and investors alike called it an economic nuclear weapon, signaling that global supply chains, AI innovation, and defense capabilities could be directly impacted. Meanwhile, the U.S. reacted with urgency, considering tariffs, domestic production plans, and alliances to secure access to these critical materials. In this presentation, we'll break down what China's new regulations entail and which products are affected, why rare earths are strategic commodities that no country can ignore, the U.S. response and implications for global trade and tech industries, the geopolitical chess game unfolding ahead of upcoming China-U.S. talks, global impact and next steps for companies, governments, and investors. By the end of this session, you'll understand why rare earths are not just minerals. They are the new battleground of the AI and tech era, and why the choices made today will shape the next decade of global innovation and security. Let's start by examining exactly what China's new rules mean for the world. Let's begin with the headline. On October 9, 2025, China's Ministry of Commerce announced two new export control rules specifically targeting rare earth materials and related high-tech components. These rules represent a significant escalation in Beijing's control over materials that are critical to modern technology, energy, and defense industries. This isn't just a routine regulatory update. This is a carefully calibrated move that has caught global supply chains and policymakers by surprise. Rare earth elements are essential for an array of high-tech applications. These include permanent magnets for electric vehicles and wind turbines, phosphors for displays, catalysts for chemical reactions, and components in military systems such as precision-guided munitions, stealth technology, and radar systems. Any disruption in the supply of these materials can ripple across multiple industries simultaneously, making them strategically invaluable. The new Chinese rules cover items containing at least 0.1% Chinese rare earth content, or products that rely on Chinese extraction, refining, or magnet-making technologies. This is a sweeping definition. For multinational corporations, this means that even if only a small portion of their supply chain touches China, for example, purchasing magnets or compounds manufactured with Chinese technology, the new rules now apply. Some rules are effective immediately, while others will be enforced fully starting December 1st. From a military perspective, China has imposed strict limitations. Exports for military applications are now principally not approved, which signals a prioritization of national security above commercial interests. For AI-related applications, each request will undergo case-by-case review, showing that Beijing is balancing its commercial ambitions with strategic imperatives. This could affect everything from high-performance chips to autonomous vehicle components that rely on rare earth magnets. In short, this is a high-stakes policy move. Rare earths are no longer just a commodity. They are a tool of geopolitical leverage. China is sending a clear signal. It controls the critical inputs for the future of technology, and it's prepared to use this control strategically. Companies that rely on these materials, especially in the U.S., Europe, and Japan, will need to reassess their sourcing strategies and risk exposure. Historically, China has used rare earth controls before. In 2010, Beijing restricted exports during a diplomatic dispute with Japan, causing global prices to spike and sparking international trade litigation. That precedent shows that China is willing to leverage its near monopoly to achieve strategic or political objectives. This new 2025 policy can be seen as the next evolution of that strategy, aligned with both economic and geopolitical goals. To understand the significance of this move, we need to appreciate just how strategic rare earth elements are. These are not just industrial inputs. They are the lifeblood of modern technology, renewable energy, and defense systems. For example, lithium, neodymium, dysprosium, and europium are indispensable for advanced electronics. Neodymium and dysprosium are used in high-strength magnets for electric motors, wind turbines, and drones. Europium is essential for LED and LCD displays. These materials underpin sectors from smartphones, laptops, electric vehicles, satellites, to fighter jets and missile systems. Without secure access, innovation in these sectors could stall, and companies could face significant cost inflation. China dominates this market. It produces approximately 70% of the world's mined rare earths, processes 90% of them, and manufactures 93% of high-performance magnets. These figures are staggering because rare earth production is highly concentrated and difficult to replicate elsewhere. Unlike oil, which can be substituted with alternative sources, rare earths are uniquely specialized. Moving supply chains to alternative producers is not trivial. It requires years of investment, regulatory approvals, environmental permitting, and technological expertise. Beijing's strategic vision is clear. Over the past 30 years, China deliberately invested in upstream mining, midstream processing, and downstream high-tech applications to build a near monopoly. The country has used this dominance as a lever in trade negotiations, technology disputes, and geopolitical maneuvering. Analysts in the U.S. and Europe often describe rare earths as the foundation of modern civilization. This is because the technologies of the 21st century, from AI chips to autonomous vehicles, renewable energy, and advanced defense systems, all rely on these elements. China's ability to control supply effectively gives it veto power over major technological trends globally. From a commercial perspective, companies that thought they could source alternative suppliers now face a reality check. Even if rare earths can technically be mined elsewhere, the cost, quality, and technical standards may not meet global demand. This reinforces the strategic leverage that China now wields. The global tech community is closely watching how companies adapt. Will they invest in domestic mining, establish joint ventures in allied nations, or stockpile reserves? Each choice has significant financial and political implications. The U.S. reaction has been immediate and intense. Think tanks, industry experts, and government officials have described China's move as akin to economic nuclear warfare. This isn't an exaggeration. It reflects the systemic risk that such a restriction could introduce to U.S. and allied supply chains. If American companies lose access to Chinese rare earths, this could directly impact AI chip production, EV battery manufacturing, defense hardware, and renewable energy technologies. These sectors are already scaling rapidly, and even temporary disruptions could cause cost spikes, project delays, and competitive disadvantages. Former President Trump also commented, warning that the U.S. may have to stop importing from China. While that sounds dramatic, it reflects the urgency and severity with which policymakers view this move. Potential responses could include tariffs, export controls on sensitive U.S. technology, accelerated domestic mining projects, and incentives for allied nations to develop supply chains. This is compounded by the fact that the White House had no prior notice from Beijing. That suddenness amplifies the perception of risk and makes strategic planning difficult. For Wall Street and global investors, this translates to potential market volatility. Companies exposed to rare earth inputs could see stock price swings as analysts reassess costs and margins. Historically, when China imposed temporary export restrictions in 2010 during a dispute with Japan, prices for neodymium oxide surged over 400% within months. Many electronics manufacturers had to scramble to secure supply or shift production temporarily. The lessons from that period underscore the global dependency on Chinese supply. So in essence, this isn't just a trade issue. It's a strategic disruption with economic, technological, and geopolitical ramifications. The U.S. and its allies now face a complex decision: attempt to retaliate, diversify supply, or accelerate domestic production, each path carrying costs and political implications. The timing of China's new rare earth controls is particularly strategic. Analysts point out that the rules were issued just ahead of the anticipated China-U.S. summit, where trade, technology, and geopolitical issues are likely to be discussed. Think of this as geopolitical chess. By tightening control over rare earths now, Beijing effectively strengthens its negotiating position. It is creating leverage. If trade concessions, technology cooperation, or tariff adjustments are on the table, China can use its control over supply as a bargaining chip. At the same time, these rules are framed in a way that aligns with international norms on dual-use technologies. Items that have both civilian and military applications are now under stricter control, and AI-related materials are being reviewed carefully. This communicates that China is taking a principled approach to national security while still facilitating compliant trade. Companies and governments are likely to respond in multiple ways. For example, Western manufacturers may accelerate investment in rare earth processing in Vietnam, Japan, and Australia, where regulatory regimes are friendlier. Others may explore recycling programs for magnets and batteries, seeking to recover critical elements from end-of-life products. The underlying message from China is clear: supply chains that rely on Chinese rare earths are strategically vulnerable. This is not merely a commercial consideration, it's a demonstration of power. Beijing is signaling that control of critical technologies can influence global trade, diplomacy, and economic outcomes. In essence, this move sets the stage for a new era in U.S.-China trade relations. Policymakers, business leaders, and investors must now account for the strategic role of rare earths in every major technology and defense discussion. Analysts will be revisiting every AI chip, EV battery, and wind turbine contract to determine exposure to these controls. Puzzle. Finally, let's consider the global implications of these regulations. First, supply disruptions are likely to drive material prices higher, impacting costs for EVs, smartphones, AI chips, and defense systems. Companies will have to either absorb these costs, pass them to consumers, or invest in alternative supply chains. Second, the U.S. and allied nations are now accelerating diversification strategies. Countries like Vietnam, Japan, Australia, and even Canada may see increased investment in rare earth mining and processing. However, these projects take years to scale. Building a domestic rare earth supply chain in the U.S., for example, could cost billions of dollars and face significant environmental and permitting hurdles. Third, global trade tensions may escalate. With tariffs, export controls, and new regulatory barriers, the economic landscape becomes more complex. Companies may need to model multiple scenarios for supply shocks, price volatility, and regulatory compliance, increasing both operational and financial risk. Fourth, rare earths are now a clear strategic battleground of the AI and technology era. As AI adoption accelerates, EV production expands, and renewable energy technologies scale, access to rare earths becomes not just a commercial necessity, but a strategic imperative. Companies and countries that anticipate this trend will gain competitive advantages. Those that lag may face supply bottlenecks and higher costs. Finally, policymakers and investors must recognize that rare earths represent a long-term strategic lever, not a temporary market disruption. China has demonstrated that it can use resource control to influence global politics, economics, and technology. U.S. policy may include incentives for domestic mining, joint ventures with allies, strategic stockpiling, and increased research into substitutes or recycling. For companies, this is a signal to audit supply chains, secure alternative sources, and innovate around material efficiency. In summary, these new rules by China are more than regulatory tweaks. They are a geopolitical signal, a trade lever, and a strategic pivot in global technology dominance. The world is entering a phase where critical materials like rare earths are central to AI, EVs, defense, and renewable energy strategies. Understanding these dynamics is essential for anyone involved in technology, finance, or global policy. To conclude, the key takeaways are: rare earths are critical strategic materials. China controls most of the global supply chain. The new rules increase geopolitical leverage and trade negotiation power. The U.S. and allies must diversify supply chains and plan strategically. This marks the beginning of a more complex, high-stakes global tech environment. For anyone tracking AI, EVs, or defense technologies, these developments are now front and center. Stakeholders must plan for both opportunity and risk in the next decade.